Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today's going to be interesting. We've got a pretty fascinating collection of sources this time. Everything from ancient philosophy to modern psychology and even some religious texts, all exploring how our past experiences can kind of unconsciously shape our present and future. It's a big deal. I mean, you don't realize how much it does. It's almost like you're trying to, like you said, decode a hidden script that's running in the background of our lives. And we're here to help you crack the code.
Yeah, it's a script that's been playing out for humanity for a long time. What I think is so striking is how many wise people across different cultures and time periods have pointed to this human tendency to get stuck in the past. It's like a universal struggle that we all deal with.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, for example, there's this really vivid image from Buddhist teachings about the monkey mind, that constant swinging back and forth between past regrets and future worries, never quite able to settle in the present moment. Have you ever noticed that in your own life, that feeling of your mind just racing, replaying old scenarios, or just fretting about what's to come?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think the sources that you've provided offer some really insightful perspectives on why this happens, like the Taoist metaphor of the cup. Its usefulness comes from its emptiness, but we insist on filling our minds with the clutter of past experiences. It's almost as if we're afraid of that emptiness, so we just cling to the past, even if it's causing us suffering.
I find that so relatable. It's like we're holding on to all those old hurts and grievances, even when they're no longer serving us. Speaking of holding on, several of the sources kind of delve into the weight of the past and how it can actually distort our perception of reality.
Right. And one of the most impactful examples comes from the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius. He said that we suffer twice, first from the event itself, and then from our judgments about it. We layer our past opinions and fears onto present experiences, making them so much heavier than they need to be.
Oh, that reminds me of that famous line from Shakespeare's Hamlet. There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. Our interpretations, often colored by our past, shape how we experience the world.
It's not just philosophers who've noticed this, though. Carl Jung, the renowned psychologist, talked about how we project our past onto the present, like a movie projector, creating what he called our personal myth. We end up living in this projected reality which is influenced by past experiences, rather than fully experiencing what is actually happening.
So it's like we're watching reruns of our old dramas instead of paying attention to the new episode unfolding right in front of us.
Yeah.
And sometimes those dramas are based on schemas, these mental frameworks that we build from past experiences that end up shaping how we see the world without us even realizing it.
Exactly. For example, let's say you had a critical parent growing up. That might create a schema where you anticipate criticism in all your relationships, even if the other person is generally supportive. You're essentially filtering your present experience through the lens of your past.
That's such a helpful way to understand schemas. It makes you wonder how much of our reality is shaped by these unconscious patterns from the past.
And that's where things start to get really interesting. Because if we can become aware of these patterns, perhaps we can start to rewrite the script.
You mean instead of being trapped by the past,
Mhm.
we can actually use it as a springboard for creating a different future? That's incredibly empowering.
Well,
But how do we even begin to do that? Where do we start?
Well, a lot of the sources that you shared point to different approaches, but there's one in particular that struck me as very practical and insightful, the work of Nancy Zapolsky.
Oh, yeah, I've read some of her stuff. It's really interesting.
Yeah, she offers this framework for understanding how we can break free from these past patterns, and it all starts with awareness.
Makes sense. If we're not even aware of how the past is influencing us, how can we change anything? But how do we actually become more aware? It all seems so subtle and unconscious.
Well, she uses this phrase, unwiring the hardwiring, to describe the process of becoming conscious of these ingrained patterns and then intentionally choosing differently. It's not about erasing the past, but about transforming its hold on us.
I love that phrase, unwiring the hardwiring.
Yeah.
It's like we're updating the software of our minds. But what does that actually look like in practice?
It starts with noticing. Pay attention to those moments when you're reacting in a way that feels out of proportion to the situation.
Oh, like when you just totally overreact to something small.
Exactly. Maybe you're feeling overly defensive or suddenly flooded with anger or anxiety. Ask yourself, is this reaction coming from the present situation or is it being triggered by something from the past?
So it's like becoming a detective of our own minds, tracing those emotional reactions back to their source. And then what happens once we've identified those patterns? How do we actually start unwiring them?
Well, Zapolsky introduces this powerful idea of nothing as the foundation for possibility.
Nothing.
Yeah, it's not about pretending the past didn't happen, but about creating clearing a space of openness where we're not bound by those old patterns and expectations.
Okay, I'm really intrigued by this nothing concept.
Mhm.
Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Imagine a sculptor starting with a block of marble. Before they can create anything new, they have to chisel away the excess stone. It's similar with our minds. To create a future that's not just a repeat of the past, we need to create some space, some emptiness, so that something new can emerge.
That's such a beautiful analogy. It's like we're clearing out the mental clutter, creating a blank canvas for a new masterpiece. But how do we actually do that? It sounds kind of abstract.
It can feel abstract at first, but there are practical things we can do. Remember all those wisdom traditions we discussed earlier? Many of them offer tools for cultivating this inner spaciousness.
Ah, so those ancient teachings are actually quite relevant to this modern concept of unwiring. I like how this is all coming together.
Exactly. For example, mindfulness meditation, which has roots in Buddhism, can help us train our attention to be more present focused, less caught up in the swirl of thoughts about the past and future.
So instead of constantly replaying those old mental movies, we're learning to simply observe our thoughts and emotions without getting swept away by them.
Precisely. And the Stoics, as we discussed, emphasized accepting what we cannot control. They understood that dwelling on the past is futile because we can't change it. The only thing we can control is our present response.
And didn't the Stoics also have a lot to say about forgiveness?
Yes, and that's another powerful tool for unwiring. Forgiveness isn't about condoning what happened, but about releasing ourselves from the burden of resentment and anger that keeps us tethered to the past. This resonates with teachings from Christianity and Islam as well, the idea of seeking forgiveness, not just from a higher power, but also from ourselves.
This resonates deeply with me. I think a lot of us hold on to past hurts, replaying them over and over in our minds. It's like we're punishing ourselves for things that we can't change.
And that self-punishment keeps us stuck. It's like carrying a heavy backpack full of rocks everywhere we go.
Ah.
Forgiveness, in a sense, is about putting down that backpack and walking forward more freely.
Wow, that's a powerful image. So we have mindfulness for cultivating present moment awareness, stoic acceptance for letting go of what we can't control, and forgiveness for releasing the burden of past hurts. Are there any other practical tools that come to mind?
Another one that comes up in a few of your sources is the power of gratitude. It might seem counterintuitive to focus on gratitude when we're talking about breaking free from the past, especially if the past has been painful. But gratitude has this remarkable ability to shift our perspective.
I'm curious to hear more about how gratitude plays into all of this.
When we cultivate gratitude, even for small things, it helps us to appreciate the present moment more fully. It's like we're training our minds to focus on what's good and beautiful in our lives, rather than dwelling on what's missing or what went wrong in the past.
It's like we're rewiring our brains to look for the good, which then makes us more receptive to positive experiences. But isn't some degree of learning from the past essential? How do we balance honoring our experiences with the need to move on?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of what Sapolsky is talking about. It's not about forgetting the past or pretending it didn't matter. It's about transforming our relationship to it. Instead of letting it dictate our present and future, we can use it as a source of wisdom and growth.
So we're not wiping the slate clean,
Mhm.
but rather reframing those past experiences in a way that empowers us to move forward.
Yes. And to do that, we need to be willing to look at the past, honestly, to acknowledge the pain, but also to recognize the lessons we've learned and the resilience we've developed as a result of those experiences.
That makes me think about how often we tell ourselves stories about the past. We create these narratives that might be based on some truth, but they've also been embellished and distorted over time.
That's a really important point. Part of unwiring is about questioning those old narratives. Are they still serving us? Are they based on facts? Or are they more like limiting beliefs that we've been carrying around for years?
So it's about becoming aware of the stories we're telling ourselves about the past, and then consciously choosing to rewrite those stories in a way that empowers us rather than holds us back.
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting, because once we start questioning those old stories and creating some space from the past, we open up the possibility of creating a future that's not just a replay of what we've already experienced.
That brings us to the final piece of this puzzle. We spent a lot of time deconstructing the past. But you mentioned earlier that some of the sources also talk about the power of intentionally creating the future.
Yes. And that's where things get really exciting.
Okay, so we've spent this whole deep dive exploring how the past can influence us in ways that we don't always realize. But, one of the sources you sent over actually takes things a step further and talks about how we can actually consciously create our future. It almost sounds too good to be true. Like, Can we really just think our way into a better reality?
Well, it's not quite that simple. It's not just wishful thinking.
Yeah.
This source really emphasizes the power of intention, but it also talks about aligning our actions with those intentions. It's about creating a kind of synergy between our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors.
So it's not enough to just sit around and daydream about, that perfect future. We actually have to take steps to make those things happen.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious about this whole idea of intention. Does it
Yeah.
really have that much power over our lives?
The source seems to suggest that our thoughts and emotions actually generate a kind of energy, and that this energy attracts experiences that are aligned with it. So if we're constantly dwelling on negative thoughts or anxieties, we're more likely to attract more of those kinds of experiences. But, if we can really focus on positive thoughts, cultivate feelings of gratitude and joy, and even try to visualize our desired outcomes, we create a magnetic field that draws those experiences towards us.
That's a fascinating concept. So it's like we're sending out a signal to the universe, and then the universe responds in kind. But how do we actually put this into practice? I'm just imagining someone sitting on their couch, visualizing winning the lottery, and then being disappointed when it doesn't magically appear.
Right. It's not about passive visualization. This source really emphasizes the importance of taking action. It's about setting clear intentions, creating a plan, and then consistently taking steps towards our goals. The visualization is more about creating a clear picture of where we're headed, which helps to focus our energy and motivation.
So it's a combination of mindset, visualization, and action. We have to truly believe it's possible, see it happening in our mind's eye, and then actually take concrete steps to make it a reality. It sounds like a powerful formula for creating change in our lives. But how do we even know what to visualize? How do we begin to set those intentions when we're just so used to being shaped by the past?
That's where all the work we've been discussing comes in that unwiring process. The more we become aware of those old patterns and limiting beliefs that are holding us back, the more space we actually create for new possibilities to emerge.
So we're clearing out that mental clutter to really make room for a new vision. And once we have that vision, we can actually start taking intentional action to bring it to life. Are there any specific techniques that this source recommends for setting intentions or for visualizing our desired outcomes?
Yeah, there are actually several. It talks about writing down our goals, creating a vision board, practicing gratitude, and surrounding ourselves with supportive people. It also emphasizes the importance of taking aligned action, even if it's just small steps at first. The key here is to just keep moving in the direction of our dreams one step at a time.
And all of this combined with that unwiring process can help us to create a future that's not just a repeat of the past, but something truly new and aligned with our deepest aspirations.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we have the power to choose differently. We're not simply products of our past, but we're also architects of our future.
So to wrap this all up for you, our listener, remember this. You are not a prisoner of your past. You have the power to break free from those old patterns, to rewrite the script, and to create a future that is worthy of your dreams.
And this deep dive has given you a glimpse of those possibilities. Now it's up to you to take these insights and weave them into your own unique journey. Go out there and create a future that truly reflects the best of who you are.